They tell you deployment hardens you. They don't tell you it can hollow you out. I was 3 days into a 12-hour night shift when my world unclipped like a snap belt. We were on rotation at a remote communications outpost. The generators hummed like a distant river, and the sky bled between black and bruised gray. I'd been awake for almost 20 hours, inventorying satellite uplinks and checking manifest lists of the kind of focus war teaches you. Between duty and the static of loneliness, my phone was my lifeline. Sarah's face, our old apartment, the kids' drawings. It was the only soft thing in that metal box of a life. The subject line read, plain and flat, "Daniel, I want a divorce." For 2 long seconds I stared as if the screen could be smudged away. The message was clinical, almost rehearsed. She was tired, saw a future with someone else. She had emptied the joint account. And final and unrepentant, "Please don't contact me. By the time you're back, I'll be gone." I remember how loud the silence became. The world fell into the spaces between the ticking on my laptop and the hum of the server rack. One of the guys at the next terminal looked up and asked if I was all right. I laughed, small, thin, and useless. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark until dawn moved like a slow hand across the tent. Everything after that felt like a list of things breaking. The picture frame still warm with touch. The voicemail where she said, "I miss you." The way the kids' drawings on the fridge suddenly looked like evidence of an old life that had been revoked. I had 2 choices in that moment. Melt into the shock and let the rest of my life be written by someone else, or do what soldiers do, assess the terrain. My first call was to the base legal office. In that sterile, fluorescent-lit room, I said words I never thought I'd say into a phone thousands of miles away. My wife sent me divorce papers. She emptied our joint account. The JAG office listened and said the only useful thing they could, secure what you can, document everything, and don't sign anything you don't understand. Back in the barracks, with a memory of her email like poison in my throat, I started to peel the situation apart. How had she drained the account? Where did the money go? Had she left with the children? The kids' faces on the fridge became coordinates on a map I couldn't refuse. I needed information. I wrote down everything I remembered about our finances: banks, credit cards, mortgage, recurring transfers. Then I contacted my father-in-law, blunt, protective, and admittedly biased, and he confirmed Sarah had been acting differently for months but had never said anything to him. Somewhere between the lies and the life, she had pulled a plug. The week that followed became a study in small, surgical actions. I notified the bank that my car was compromised and asked the bank to flag unusual activity. I filed a formal complaint with the bank's fraud department. Not with exact steps or strategy, just an honest, legal notification of suspicious withdrawals. I made formal, stateside calls through JAG. They advised contacting a family law attorney and a private investigator. I did both. This is not a heist, and it's not a stunt. It's tedious. It's waiting. It's paperwork that smells faintly of bureaucrats and late nights. The private investigator I hired, Tom, was the kind of man who kept receipts for everything he did. He found receipts I didn't know had existed. Wire transfers to a name I'd never heard. Nightly ATM withdrawals that added up faster than any normal person's grocery bill. He found a pattern, a trail of small, discrete transactions that culminated in a lump sum transfer to an account in another city. More importantly, he found a man, Marcus Lang, Sarah's new partner. Marcus had charm on the surface and a history of comfortable deniability underneath. He worked in real estate, or at least he gave that impression. Tom's job was to collect traces, not to convict. He collected social media breadcrumbs, overlapping phone numbers, and a trail of receipts that matched the timing of when Sarah had access to the joint account. Every piece of paper, every timestamp withdrawal became a nail. I kept them in a folder and slept with it under my duffel. At the same time, the attorney, Maya, walked me through the simple and the brutal. File for divorce as soon as you can. Petition the court for emergency relief if the other party has dissipated marital assets. Get a temporary restraining order if there is any question of safety, and get counsel involved for any financial litigation. There were no guarantees. The law is a blunt instrument. Sometimes it bends your heart into something you do not recognize. But it was the tool that, used properly, could stop a thief with a wedding ring. I told Maya everything. The email, the emptied account, the transfers. She took everything in and told me to breathe once. Then she told me to sign a power of attorney so she could act quickly on my behalf while I was deployed, not to do anything reckless, but to file motions, to place holds, to make sure the legal machine began its work. I want to make this clear. The plan was legal. I did not hack servers, siphon accounts, or pretend to be someone I wasn't. I used patience, paperwork, human witnesses, and the expensive thing called time. Step 1 was to freeze what could be frozen. Maya filed an emergency motion to prevent the dissipation of marital assets and requested the court to compel the banks to produce records. The judge signed an order that put a temporary hold on certain accounts, enough to stop the bleeding. That bought time. Step 2 was to tie the transfers to Sarah and Marcus in a way that the court could understand. Tom's report included timestamps and photographs. Maya's forensic accountant translated withdrawal spikes into patterns consistent with planning and intent. The complaint alleged conversion of marital property and asked for an accounting. Step 3 was psychological. Prepare for the public unraveling. Divorce courts are not tabloids, but they are public. Marcus's credit history and business filings were examined. It turned out Marcus had been building a facade. Shell companies, rental addresses, a corporation that took in payments and seemed to have no employees. Those were red flags, not proof. But proof doesn't have to be theatrical. It only has to be convincing to a judge. We also crafted a narrative that the judge could believe without moralizing, that a spouse had taken marital assets for personal use without notice, hindering the other spouse's ability to provide for the children. The law likes practical things, child support, mortgage payments, not melodrama. So that's what we argued. I landed on a damp evening in late spring. Home smelled different than I remembered. The city had kept moving while my life had paused. I walked into my old house and found it quiet. There were no children's bicycles in the yard, no sock piles. There was a note on the kitchen counter directing me to a P.O. box for further correspondence. My chest went cold all over again. The court date was looming. Maya had arranged with forensic accounting, the bank records, and a subpoena that forced an explanation for where the money had gone. The judge read the case materials. And for the first time in months, I felt something like the possibility of an answer. In family court, you stand at the mercy of other people's calendars and sympathies. Witnesses testified. Tom gave his account. The bank's representative confessed to processing transfers, but pointed to the signature and the authorization, Sarah's. Marcus's name appeared in more forms than I liked. He sat in court with that same smile, as if he'd been performing all along. The judge granted a temporary order. The identified accounts would be frozen, and an accounting would be required. More importantly, the judge ordered provisional custody arrangements that ensured the children's stability. It was not a victory so much as a reprieve. Part 6, The Unraveling, when lies rent like old clothes. With the court order in place, the forensic accountant followed the money. It turned out that Sarah and Marcus had been funneling funds into a business that promised quick real estate flips, but actually served as a clearinghouse for Marcus's purchases. A car in his name, a condo in his mother's name, a raft of purchases that looked glamorous on social media. The real sting came when the bank produced messages, texts, and emails between Sarah and Marcus that referenced transfers and timing. Marcus had been sloppy at one point. He forwarded a merchant receipt to Sarah and CC'd the office email of his own company from a personal account. That link, small and stupid and human, was enough. A judge can order restitution. A judge can also hand down contempt if you ignore a court order. When a subpoena hit Marcus's business, they produced shaky invoices, contracts with no signatures, and a bank ledger with questionable entries. The more we saw, the more the facade peeled away. Word traveled in the small networks. Marcus's job, which relied on local networks and reputations, started to crumble under the weight of witnesses who wanted to tell the truth. Some out of conscience, some for money, some to avoid being dragged into a legal quagmire. Sarah's friends began to text things that made her look less like a victim and more like an actor in a fraud show. I did not post any photos or rage posts. I let the court handle the narrative. The legal system can move slowly, but where social media escalates, it also hollows out. People began to line up in small, important ways. Former clients complaining about Marcus's business. Neighbors reporting strange activity. The case shifted from he said to a ledger of transactions and corroborating testimony. Part 7. The payback, not blood but restitution. Revenge in movies is fast and clean. Real life is a different thing. It's paperwork and subpoenas, depositions and affidavits. But it is still possible to be meted out. The court ordered restitution. The frozen accounts were partially unfrozen with conditions. A large portion of the transferred funds were placed in escrow pending final resolution. Marcus was found to have engaged in deceptive practices by the court. While he skirted criminal charges due to jurisdictional limits and plea bargaining, he did not escape civil liability. He had to give up the condo he'd purchased and sell the car. Those assets were liquidated and directed back to the marital estate. Contracts he'd used as cover were declared void. Sarah's actions cost her reputation, and more painfully, the stability she had promised the children. The court adjusted custody in ordering a shared parenting plan that prioritized the children's welfare, meaning she can get to walk away with them into a glittering new life without consequences. The judge also assigned a financial guardian to oversee Sarah's access to funds for the children's expenses until a more permanent arrangement could be made. It was not total victory. We did not get everything back. People who conspire to hide assets and shield them behind intermediaries can often keep a portion. We recovered enough to catch up on mortgage payments, to return some sense of normality to the kids, and to pay the legal fees that had to be paid. More importantly, I got something I hadn't expected, a sense of control. When the case concluded, the court's ruling acknowledged the theft and imposed remedies. The satisfaction was not cinematic. It was a quiet click of a lock being turned in the courtroom, a legal recognition that what happened was wrong, and that I had not been defeated by distance or impotence. Part 8. The twist, what you didn't see coming. If the reader needs a twist, let it be this. My revenge was not crafted to humiliate or destroy beyond necessary. I wanted justice, and that justice included protecting the children and reclaiming what was ours. But there was one final twist of consequence that neither Sarah nor Marcus saw coming. Marcus, for all his smooth talk, had a history that began to surface during the depositions. Local vendors he'd stiffed had banded together. A contract he'd used in court was traced to a company that had been dissolved during a previous legal action. The paper trail, combined with testimony from other towns, allowed another set of lawyers to file a civil suit under consumer protection laws for deceptive business practices. Marcus's reputation collapsed further. His ability to obtain financing in areas vanished. Sarah watched that happen from a distance. She found, to her horror, that the new life she tried to buy was stolen in her tracks. Her social circle narrowed. The complete isolation of public embarrassment, friends who sided with truth rather than spectacle, was worse than any of the money she'd lost. I did not gloat. I never posted a single vindictive status or private message. What I did do was make sure the truth lived where it mattered, in court on record with witnesses documented and referenced. Marcus paid restitution. Sarah had to engage with the consequences of her choices. Part 9, Aftermath, Repair, Not Revenge. Months turned into a calendar of small, good things. I saw the kids on weekends. We rebuilt some rituals. Saturday cartoons, pancakes. The slow, lumbering rebuild of trust that children have with the world. I worked shifts, took counseling, and slept with a folder of court documents under my pillow for a while because old habits die slow. I also learned the cost of silence. If there was a soft moral here, it was that betrayal thrives in secrecy. The remedy was not vengeance, but vigilance. Paperwork, witnesses, competent legal counsel. It was boring and expensive and humane. Sarah moved away to a small apartment under conditions set by the court. She reached out once with a tentative letter. No apology, only explanation. I replied with facts. Third-party logistics for custody, arrangements for support, a calm outline of what needed to be done for the children. I refused to be sucked into drama. That was my final act of control. Years later, when my hair got flecks of silver and the kids were teens, I taught them a simple thing. People will disappoint you, sometimes painfully. The remedy is not to retaliate in kind, but to take steps to protect the vulnerable. Document, Ask for help, and do not let someone's betrayal remove your right to a decent life. Was the outcome perfect? No. Did the scales balance? Only in part. But justice has many faces. Sometimes it is a court order that forces a dishonest man to take responsibility. Sometimes it's the way your children feel safe again because their life has structure. Sometimes it's simply knowing you did not give up when the world tried to rewrite your life. When I tell this story now, it's not to glorify pain. It's to say that when betrayal comes dressed as abandonment, the way back is patient, legal, and deliberate. You don't need a spectacle to set things right. You need evidence, human allies, and the stubbornness to show up in court with your truth. Sarah never saw the whole thing coming. Not because I engineered some cinematic trap, but because she assumed absence would equal silence. I learned that silence is a choice, and so is how you respond to it. And in the end, what I kept was simple. My children's stability, a roof over our head, and the knowledge that I had fought back in a way that would let them sleep at night. That, in a small and honest way, was the last laugh